Alright, let's get into it. Okay, so there's one quick thing that we need to talk about from our previous discussions, and what we're going to discuss works the same for either the hierarchical clustering or the k-means clustering. Both of them are kind of the same thing. Either way, we're going to want our data. I don't remember if I have. Oh, there it is. No, come back. That one right there. Okay. Our know thy customer data. So, okay. Well, I was optimistic that our pointer focused trial would keep out of the way, but apparently I'm going to clear it every 5 minutes. Oh boy, it's going to be fun. Okay, so let's go in. It's going to load data mining. Okay, there we go. So, let's say that we run our hierarchical clustering with our cursor in the data. I almost made that classic mistake. Hierarchical clustering. Can you control A this? No. Oh. You kind of can. That was interesting. Not sure what it did, but we got there in the end. So you can use Control A is Control Alt. That shortcut works on a lot of things. So I've never tried Control A. I thought I had actually, and it didn't work. So I tried it again for fun, and yeah, still works. Or you can do the shift click thing that you groaned about last time. You know, shift click. Oh, good job. Like that. You can do that kind of a process if you want. But either way. Okay, now whenever we're doing hierarchical clustering, we're going to have to configure our way of doing distance measures. I put it back. I left out nothing. Told the whole truth. I'm just going to pick McQuitty's method for clustering distance. It doesn't really matter for the sake of this illustration. And then I'm going to attempt to click on, there we go, normalize input data. Now again, for the point of me doing this extra demonstration, I don't really care what I put here, but whenever you're actually doing this, make sure you're checking the instructions. It matters. Just, you know, I don't have it in front of me. So, sure, that sounds good.
Next, go finish.
I was just checking with the defaults before I hit finish. Yes?
So the homework, it asks you to do that type of data mining. Does it really matter the category?
The category. Give me a hint. What are you talking about?
So you know how you just chose like the first clustering method? Yeah, there you go, clustering method.
Yes, that matters.
Okay, so for example, if you like not normalize it, does it give you the option in the Excel? Because I tried doing that, it's part of the homework.
Yeah. You need to normalize. You have to do all the instructions.
Right.
Now, I don't know this is the problem, but there's one. I told you before. If you have error, if you're missing options, which you don't have, make sure you didn't choose predict. Make sure you click the cluster on the left. That might be your problem. If you're not finding the options you're supposed to have, make sure that you clicked cluster. Now, just for fun, actually, let's do it this way. I'm going to use the same inputs as the textbook for problem 2. Just so you see what it's supposed to be.
So what did you do to delete that?
Click on the tabs, click shift, click on the other tab, click delete. Okay, so in the textbook, or problem 2, which we're not using this data set, so it's not going to look just right, but we are supposed to normalize input data. It says it in bold. Okay, that's checked right here. We're good to go. Use wards method. Okay. With 10 clusters.
Still hierarchical, right?
Hierarchical. Yep. With 10 clusters.
Hold on. Normalize, you said what, Moore's method?
Normalize, wards method, 10 clusters.
Finish.
And then finish. If this is wildly unfamiliar, there's a video for that. That's why. I'm not going to go over it in detail today because we already did this tutorial. If you didn't study it, you still can. There's time. But we're not going to go over it in detail again. I already did it once and it's recorded. You can watch it at your own leisure. So, if you go to the HC Clusters tab, this is what you'll see. Everybody stops and staring at me. It's an old song. Not that old, it's like, what, 10 years? LMFAO? You guys remember that group? Yeah.
L who?
Pretty much. They were famous for Sexy and I Know It.
What was
And Party Rock Anthem.
Yeah.
We're like, they're
what was the name of the group?
LMFAO.
LMFAO.
As in like LOL, but then more enthusiastic.
What does it mean?
Laugh my flipping butt off.
That's the name of the group?
Seriously, yeah. Well, yes, I mean, I'm censoring myself. LMFAO. Now, I think it's one of those things, if you ask them, like, what's it stand for? Oh, it doesn't stand for anything. You're like, okay. Anyway, okay, point being, I'm stalling for you to get your clusters figured out. So, what's really important is that we get to these sub-clusters list. So in this case, depending on how you have it set up, they can be the same. Someone asked me, actually, are they the same? These are not. My answer may have been confusing. So the ideas, cluster versus subcluster, are not the same. But in this case, they may be the same numbers, depending on how you have the options configured. So what you want to use is the subcluster, meaning these record IDs, this is just the index. The first one, the second one, the third one, or in this case, the 164th one. And it tells you which cluster it ended up in. So, what you can do is you can copy this column. But you do this by putting your cursor here and then selecting the whole thing. Now, I think, I usually use a keyboard shortcut. Can I double click this? No? Can I select the column this way? No. Okay, shortcut it is. So you can click and drag. That works. It's just slow. There's a better way. Control, Shift, down. I'll put it on the screen for you with my new fancy computer. No, I know. Now you do. And so Control and an arrow key jumps to the end of your data. Shift and an arrow key highlights as you move around. So Control and Shift highlights everything between there and the end of the data set. So that means you have to start at the first item in the data set or you won't get everything. It's a good little trick. Here's what you really need to know about this. If you're staring at your thing, trying to get all your options to work, stop. It's not worth it right now, because I'm about to leave it. Okay? What you need to know is this. You go to the HC clusters. You use that little keyboard shortcut I just showed you to save yourself from having to scroll through 500 rows. Then, you copy this column, Control-C, copy, come back to your data. So the reason we're copying our data is so we can paste our data. So we are pasting the cluster number into our data set. Now I did not select the column title, which I usually do, so I'm going to have to, I put it in the wrong spot. There we go. Okay. Ooh. Wrong button. Try again. Cluster number, or just cluster or something. And the formatting's not important because I'm going to override it in a moment anyway. So, just go to HC clusters, take the subcluster column, copy and paste into here. if you do what I did, and you type it in, if you put it in the wrong spot, in the wrong row, right-click on cluster number, click Insert, Shift Cells Down, and then type it in. So, if you're just baffled right now, figure this out later. Skip to here, and pretend you have the data figured out right. Just type in cluster number, hold down 1 or something, and copy it for the whole data. Fill handle it down for 500 rows and come back. Because you can follow along from there. So, if that's not clear what I mean, if you're not with me, just type in cluster, put 1, fill handle, oh, I missed one. Fill handle and make yourself a column. Control up will take us back to the top. Of course your results won't match mine, but at least you'll get the idea what you're doing. Now I'm not doing this, so I'm going to delete this row. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is format this as a table. Now you may be thinking, Rob, it's already a table. Well, yes, but it's not formatted as one. In Excel's terms. So what we're going to do is go back on our Home tab. There's a button up at the top, Format as Table. When you click that, it not only makes things prettier, but it attaches the data filter buttons. So it saves yourself some effort of having to make things all pretty and bold and centered and all the good stuff. So you can simply
format as table.
Format as table. Now I think you have to have your whole data selected first, right?
But that person has to be in the data, right? Or
yeah.
to highlight the data.
You may have to highlight it all first. I don't know. I just highlighted it all to be safe. Control A. You don't have to? Okay. That was my first instinct, but as I was talking, I second guessed myself. So, Control A will solve your problem. And click OK. Oh, it's giving us a...
We may click OK. So I can pick anyone I want in the table format?
Yep, doesn't matter.
I want to do something radical.
There we go. I don't like ugly format, so I'm fixing my format.
I can get rid of that.
Oh, yeah. The blue, the easiest way to do it is, I wasn't sure if you cleared the old formatting, if it would automatically apply the new formatting from the table. It doesn't if you don't do the clearing first. So instead, highlight this column, fill it over, and change to fill formatting only, or highlight all the data and then use the format painter in the top left column. Meaning up here, format painter. You can select your data, format paint over to the right cluster. There's lots of ways to do it. I don't want you to be hung up on that right now. So, this will work if you're doing basic operations. Now, for some things, you're actually going to want to use a pivot table. So we've done pivot tables before, but some things that you might want to do. So, for example, if you want to just quick and dirty, like I want a table and I want to be able to look at my clusters, this is a good way to go. Just format it as a table, and then you can use these filtering buttons to say, I only want to look at cluster 1, and I want to see all the individual items in cluster 1. Then you can uncheck select all and check 1. Come on. Why are you so slow today? At your leisure. Okay. Try this again. Uncheck, select all, check 1, and then click OK. And it takes away, and more specifically, it hides all of the values, all of the rows that do not belong to cluster 1. Now, if you did my trick where you said, I'm behind, I'm going to just slap in a column full of 1s, then it won't change your data, because the only thing you have is cluster 1. But if you have the correct answers, if you're following along with this later, Then when you go to 1, it'll take out everything that isn't cluster 1 and allow you to look at the individuals. Oh, geez. At the individuals. At the individual items in this data set. Okay, so I got somebody who's 48, female, making $17,546 a year. They're single with 1 child, no car, no mortgage. Cluster 1. Now, what the textbook asks you to do is actually to use a pivot table.
From this point here?
Well, you can technically skip that first step of formatting it. You don't need to do that. You don't need to use the pivot. You don't have to format as a table first. You can go straight to inserting the pivot chart. But a lot of the time, or the pivot table, excuse me, a lot of the time I don't bother with this. I just format as a table, and it gets me some access to the data quickly. So it depends on how powerful of an analysis you need to do. Now, because this resolution is messed up, we can't see my right column, which is really irritating. That fits on this end. Okay, so that formatting will work for the projector. So I apologize for the fact that you can't see the sides otherwise, and doubly so for this lovely trial version. Go away. Okay, so what we're going to want to know is we're going to want to look at each of our data values. We're going to want to know the average for these data values for each cluster. So what we're going to do is drag. I love working on a trackpad. Try again. Okay. So we're going to drag cluster number down to our rows. Now, there's nothing in our table yet, so it hasn't done anything at the moment. What we're about to do is drag all of our 7 variables into the value set. And that's going to give us a new column for each of our 7 variables. So, just go ahead and do that. It's already back. Do you freaking mind? I should check Mary. Where's it go? Huh. So it does default. I think wherever you put your last. I think it's however wherever you put your last thing is where the checked goes, but don't quote me on that. If in doubt, you can just click and drag. On a trackpad, that's horrible. So on a mouse, I just click and drag. I almost always work with a mouse, so I don't bother with the shortcuts usually. Meaning, like, what do you do when you have a laptop? I try to avoid having a laptop at work. Okay, now the problem is the default calculation format is sum. Control. Or no, is it Windows plus? There we go, Windows plus. That's the shortcut. Okay, so if you see, these all say sum. Well, that's a problem. If it's not followed by body once told me. So, sorry, I couldn't resist. Okay, so we're going to need to go into our value field settings and change all of these calculations from sum to average. If you remember how to do that, I hope, from pivot table. Now, with the screen zoomed in like that, I'm going to have to move back and forth, which is really tedious. So I'm going to zoom back out, but just follow me on the process. So, change one sum.
All of them to average, right?
To average. What is my cursor? My cursor's smoking something today. I don't know. It's legal now, I guess, but man. Okay, one excruciating minute later, we have averages. And if you want to go in and like reformat some stuff and be like, hey, these are dollars, but everything else are binary. Okay. So that bit is optional. You absolutely don't have to do that. Please? Wow, my computer's slow today. Still can't see, can you? No? Okay. Oh, that's going to be way too small. What am I doing? This is a case when you probably want to change the column labels to make it fit a little better on the screen. But I'm having to zoom in really far, so normally you wouldn't have this problem. Okay. So here's what matters.
How did you change yours to dollar sign?
There's a dollar sign button up here.
Oh.
And you highlight the date, click the dollar sign button. Okay, so here's why we've done this. We're doing this. Check it out. Now check me out. So, we have clusters on the left. It says row, but they're clusters. You can change the name if you want. Clusters, cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, cluster 4. And we have averages for each of these clusters. Now, it's a little hard to tell like what's above average, what's below average, or whatever. But on something that's binary, it's obvious because you know what the maximum and minimum are. And you can look and be like, okay, well, I don't know if $40,000 is a lot for my sample, but I know it's a lot more than 17. And just by kind of looking at the averages, you can kind of feel that somewhere in the 20s is probably about middle, maybe low 30s. So you can kind of eyeball it. But if you see something like this, 1. What does that mean? The average is 1.
Everybody's married.
Say it again?
Everybody's married?
Everybody is married. Or at least close enough that it rounds up to from 2 decimal points, which means at least 99.5%. So the